It is now 6:00. We are now permitted to begin talking about our topic. Luca, do you want to bring us in?
Is that my job now? Okay.
Sure is, buddy.
It has been. It's 2 for 2. So, welcome everybody to the third installment of Theorycraft. This is a usually weekly Clubhouse channel where a couple of us game developers get together and talk about various things with our player bases and just compare experiences. So appreciate you all being here. Usually we first go around the room and just do some quick introductions. And I think usually Candace kicks that off. So she's doing that again this week.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name's Candace Thomas. I am a principal game designer at Riot, though the opinions expressed here are mine and not the opinions of my employer. I've been making video games for almost 15 years now, notably mostly working on World of Warcraft and Diablo 4. Did a hot stint at Amazon Game Studios, and I worked with Chris, who's going to go next.
Cool, thanks, Candace. Yeah, game designer of 13 years. Used to work at Blizzard Entertainment on World of Warcraft. Did a lot of class design and spells and systems and things like that. Had the pleasure of working with both Candace and Kevin. So, yep. And that's me. And Kevin, would you like to go?
All right, thanks, guys. My name's Kevin Jordan. I think I'm like an 18-year veteran, right around there. The industry. I worked on World of Warcraft first. That was my first game, and from very early on in the game's development. And then I've also worked at Obsidian Entertainment and Cryptozoic Entertainment or Hex Entertainment. And I've also had the pleasure of working with Chris and Candace, though we never met. Candace and I, but we were on the team together at the same time. And Luca, I've never worked with, but. Apparently, he was also on the WoW team for a while.
Heroes of the Storm. Yeah, Chris is the Kevin Bacon of this group, but okay. I never worked with him directly either. We just. By the way, I guess I'm going now.
I get you.
It's me now. My name's Luca, and I am a sound designer of about 10 years. Currently, I work at a studio in Vancouver, British Columbia called Clay Entertainment. They make Don't Starve, Oxygen Not Included. But before that, I was in the States. I am an American, and I was at Blizzard for a little over a year on the Heroes of the Storm team, where I met Chris, through whom I know both Candace indirectly and Kevin because I started following his stream when it started going. I'm here to just offer my takes from a generalist and a sound designer perspective. And so this week we thought we would talk about the concept of feedback and kind of player-developer relations, which I know just personally is something I've discussed a whole bunch, I feel like, with Chris offline or online on Discord. Managing the back and forth between player expectations and developer responses and how that tone is struck, how stuff is communicated, what the messaging feels like, how people react to it internally. I just feel, to me, first off, I've never been on the PR side, within a game developer, but from a player side, I just feel like every studio has their own special way that they want to handle this, but it can seem like such a black box where it's, it can be like, oh, we've got forums. Maybe I'll whine about something on the Reddit. Maybe I'll make a giant analysis video. Maybe I'll @ people on Twitter. Players want more access to devs now, I feel like, than ever because they can get it. And it's just the ways in which devs respond to that is really different from case to case. And I don't think players really oftentimes know how that stuff moves around once it gets inside the studio, if it does. And I kind of just wanted to source some opinions from you all. Like, Kevin, you said you might be able to really tuck into this one.
Yeah, for sure.
Maybe we should just kick it off with, Blizzard and the conversation between players, and let's just get into it. Players in the World of Warcraft development team is probably, I feel like, one of these most well-known dynamics. It's long and storied, and it's been through a bunch of chapters.
Yeah.
You've experienced some personally. where would you start to talk about this topic?
Yeah, it's so historically I've had it's been interesting for me because I've been on the side where before a lot of these elements like Reddit and Twitter and YouTube and Twitch. So I remember like the back in my day scenario, and then I've also now for a while been on Twitch, and so I've been kind of on the other side. And I've watched the videos of devs speaking their minds and talking about the new and upcoming things, and I've thrown a few cabbages myself, right? Being just a player now on the other side, so I feel like my experience has been had a lot of perspective over the years. And first, I'll kind of talk about the way we used to do things at Blizzard, and just jump in once I get too long-winded. I can go for hours, but. The way it used to work was the devs were kind of hidden, like there was a big layer between devs and the player base. And the layer between us were the community managers. And the community managers played a really important role, not only in shielding devs from not just the player base, but the workload of managing the player base, which is a tremendous job to be done right. But they also shielded the player base from the devs in a lot of cases, because as many of us know, the more brilliant people get, sometimes they're not the most socially adept people. So they have trouble communicating and convincing people of things, and they can come across very egocentric and, very, very aloof, and, that's kind of in the best of cases, and sometimes just downright nasty, right? And so the community manager's job, which if you select a good community manager, he has all the skills he needs to effectively communicate with the player base, whereas a full-time developer may not have those skills. And so that layer was actually really important, and served a great purpose. And it also, and we talked about this a little bit in our first Clubhouse, but it also freed the developers' time up to do the core job, which was, develop the game. And so that, and that's his core function. If we wanted to, and players are going to hate me because I actually liked that system and how it worked for a lot of reasons, but it does mean the player base gets less direct contact with the devs. But in order for a dev to be an effective dev and serve the purpose that the players want, they have to mix their skills. They have to be kind of a hybrid dev and community manager. And that takes a lot of time, and it dilutes their skill set, right? And so it's a tricky thing to find. There have been several people, over the years that have been able to do both effectively. But even when they're doing it effectively, they're spending a lot of time being a community manager and not an actual dev. So that can hurt a project if those people are also some of the more brilliant, developers on the team. So now we look at it from a point of, the community is demanding, access, and they get it a lot of times, but it's unsatisfying. And typically what it leads to is a lot of anger and frustration, and sometimes just downright hate directed at developers. And we all know many stories of community managers getting burned out because of having to endure the community when they're at their worst. But this also applies to developers as well. And developers are human beings just like anyone else. And at the end of the day, they want to make a great game, but they also want not to be hated. And so when they make decisions, when they're kind of bombarded with this level of hatred, and anger and frustration, they're going to slowly wear down and start making decisions that are, pleasing to the community, but not good for the game necessarily. And so that can lead to, what we talked about before, which is that sort of democratic design, which I think is a recipe for disaster. So I think it's definitely in the case of one of those be careful what you wish for kind of things. I think there is a better model out there. I just don't think we've hit upon it yet. But right now, you see a lot of devs that are they seem worn out. They seem beaten down by the community, and sometimes the design is compromised because of that. They're desperate to be liked rather than treat the game like a work of art that they have a special vision to execute on, but have trouble with because somebody out there disagrees.
Yeah, I think it's interesting now because I think really to have a game team these days is like you need to have this sort of skill of public relations and talking with players and answering questions and doing it in a way that is authentic, but then doesn't rile them up to get them upset with you, right? And it's not easy. I think for most developers, they get scared talking with players, or they just get annoyed that they do not see eye to eye and like what you're trying to do. And I think really, like you're saying, Kevin, like originally, Blizzard's sort of methodology or way of thinking about players and developers in the relationship is just that we're artists, we're creatives, we're creating a game here, and we hope you come and play it, but it's not up to us to like convince you to play it, or we're not, it's like you said, we're not designing by democracy here. It's a vision, and it's art that we're creating, and whether you want to play it or not is up to you. And I think that's always going to be a superior. Yeah. And I think ultimately the players, I think, have some sort of kind of feeling that they want like the things that in the game they want the developer to add the things in the game that they want them to add. But I think really, honestly, the player is best served by just kind of getting whatever the creative vision of the developers are, because you're always just going to get the best sort of product or game that way.
And at least there's an honesty there, and then the market sort of determines, is this something people like or not,
Exactly.
I have kind of a different approach or history, I guess, with like PR and wanting to be a part of that and wanting to be a spokesperson. I had this idea that I wanted to humanize developers because, you see people say awful things. Like just today on Twitter, someone from Apex Legends is like, if you speak to anybody this way, much less some devs, please consider a new hobby and let it include self-reflection, because it's just like the most hateful thing. So I'm like, well, I can make a difference, right? I can be that face for the company. I can provide a welcoming face for this product that I love so much and like share it with the world. And also I can be a face that's maybe not a face that you expected in the game industry, and invite other people, maybe like women, or I'm not a person of color, but I'm not a white man. And so maybe it invites other people to feel like they could be included in that space. So I had this really like noble intention coming into Blizzard, saying I wanted to be part of PR. I wanted to go on, launch events, and I wanted to speak. It was like my career goal to speak on the front stage of Blizzcon. And I finally did that the year before I left. But what was striking about it was that I didn't, like Kevin was saying, I didn't have the skills for it. I'm not a people person. I say a lot. I'm not a very charismatic / photogenic person, so my headshot takes a long time. But what I also mean by that I wasn't the right person was I kept floundering with announcements. I would say, like, here's the feature and here's the artistic theme, and I would try to be that spokesperson for a feature or for the game in a way that wasn't authentic to what my role at the company was. And so I wasn't actually very I don't know, I just wasn't the right person to be talking about the art style of World of Warcraft. I just like I wouldn't be the right person to talk about sound if Luca was here, right? So that actually led me to kind of like introspectively. And what I was also going to say was I was very comfortable talking about the stuff that I did know a lot about. So if you were to ask me about encounters or dungeon systems or whatever, I would try to steer the conversation into that. Anytime I had a press interview or anytime I would work the stage, the press booth at BlizzCon, stuff like that. But kind of the negative space there is what struck me, where I only have this kind of narrow understanding of this huge game ecosystem that I'm trying to represent for my company. And of course, I'm not the right person to make the front stage announcement for the new expansion. for World of Warcraft, right? I only work on this little bit of it, but it challenged me to ask, why am I okay with that? Why am I okay with the fact that I would have to memorize a bunch of taglines about these features? Why don't I know more about these features? Why don't I ask to be included on this stuff? So I just legit started asking leadership, like, can I start being a part of these meetings? And they said yes. And so it was kind of like a springboard for my career when I realized, like, I wanted to be this face for the company, but I didn't know what I was talking about. And I'm not comfortable if I don't know what I'm talking about. So maybe I should know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and that's another interesting point that I wanted to bring up too. Is it takes a lot of time to really understand the development process. And here you are, a person that was actually on the team, and you're realizing how long it would take to know everything about every decision, right? And that's what players expect, and they want to know, but it's actually a very time-consuming process. As Chris can attest, like, we spent hours and hours and sometimes days and days talking about one feature and how it was going to go in and why it was good and why it was bad. And those conversations are very deep and they're very involved and they're very complex. And players, it's hard to give like a soundbite to players in order to help them understand why it is you're doing the things you're doing. You kind of have to, like, in order to do it correctly, you have to give them a primer on being a game designer. And then once they understand the basics, then kind of re-explain all of the conversations you've had internally on how you got to the place you've gotten to. And that's that's an impossible task. And so you have to sum it up very briefly, and it's very difficult to actually do that. And so the process of satisfying everyone's curiosity is really challenging. And that's all it is curiosity. They don't actually want to, some do obviously, but most players don't want to get that deep into it. They just want to know, why did you put this crappy system in, right? Or why did you put this thing in that annoys me? And it's like, well, because that thing does a lot of great work, like.
I always felt bad for the producers who, had to do interviews, and then they would get asked questions like, why did you nerf like Ignite or something, and it's just like, well, we can't, they don't know that question.
Right. Yeah. And to know everything about every question, that people would want isn't just an impossible thing. And so it's a huge gap. There's a huge gap between true understanding of what's going on in any one decision on the team that's complex and what the players, and the information they have. So it's a very, very tough job to actually satisfy the community. And that's assuming the community is all of one mind and they're all going to agree, which is also an impossible, expectation. So, and that's why we get, like, I'm convinced if I had been more in the forefront and talking with the community more frequently, like Greg Street was, Ghost Crawler, I would have been the meme of the week, right? Like, because even if half the people agreed with me, about what we were doing and the explanations I was giving, the other half would still be making memes out of me, right? Because they don't agree. So, and people don't make memes of agreement, right? They always make memes of disagreement. So, I would have been that guy that's, that you think you do, but you don't. And, all the other, phrases I might have used trying to convince people that this was good for the game or whatever. And so that's the most common outcome when, the two groups get together. And it's rough. It's rough on the devs, and it's unsatisfying for the players. So it's a really, really tough problem to solve.
I have a comment from my friend Zach, who was my former guild leader in Vanilla and is chilling in the audience, which is that rolling ignites did not need a nerf. So Kevin, I don't know if it was you who was responsible for that, but
right.
as the mage who stole all of the DPS for every mage in the entire raid, I think he had a problem with that. But
what about the threat generated from rolling ignites? That need a nerf?
I mean, I'm pretty sure someone was always around to OC res Zach and or bring him back multiple times. But that's how that went, and things were fine. Obviously, Classic's still popular now, so Case in point.
That's right. But yeah, try to convince people of why people like classic, and it's still an uphill battle a lot of times. But yeah, a lot of people love classic, but it's a tough job to really explain why the game was so popular and why the game was so beloved.
There's a lot to unpack here, as the saying goes. I have to wonder, the tone of developer-player relations is going to be different on every possible platform you could have it on. You know, Candace's experience on the stage at Blizzcon, I mean, that's a very carefully controlled, curated event, you know, until Diablo 4 Red Shirt guy gets up there and just destroys everything anyways. And then you've got Twitter, where the conduct is a certain way, and you've got kind of the dynamic between personal accounts and developers with blue check marks sort of enjoying a bit of like pseudo celebrity amidst the echo chamber that we all kind of keep in our wake. And you know, not wanting to get harassed on personal time about issues in the game. You've got, you stream. I don't think it's very common for devs to just personally stream and deflect questions, but you know, there are official forums, there are subreddits. What do you all maybe think is, like, what's your ideal forum for player feedback? If you could clamp down everything to just one sort of channel, excepting, you know, something in person, like at a convention, you know, how do you feel it's best moderated, this stuff? How would you prefer to receive it, you know?
I mean, yeah, I don't know. I feel like, you know, as a developer, I would use like all of them. I would, you know, I'd read Discord chats that I was in. Like sometimes I would join like random rated battleground sort of Discords, and then now and then you'd see in the chat like someone, it would blow up about some change that was made. I'd go, oh, that's interesting feedback. Or, you know, Twitter or YouTube videos. I'd always watch these long form YouTube videos of things I'd make or systems or whatever. I think the most superior way a developer can understand the game is by playing it with players live. Just join, you know, with the case of WoW, like I said, like joining a rated battleground team, doing a dungeon with players, just questing in the world and seeing what happens, you know, for the case of WoW as a specific example, because you're never going to understand you know, it's hard to understand the context of feedback a lot of times from forums or whatever. You really just have to play the game and play it with the players to get the full resolution of what potential issues can be.
It's huge.
This is making me. I mean, maybe I'm baiting you into this, Chris, but what sort of things have you ever asked of people you've randomly played with in World of Warcraft? You know, questions you were burning to hear the answers to.
Yeah, where can we see the undercover boss?
Yeah,
episode?
you ever go undercover? Yeah.
Well, I remember. God, I don't remember what expansion it was, but you know, I designed a lot of the priest class, or the priest spells and stuff like that. Some of the talents and gameplay and tuning. And I remember I was doing random dungeons as a priest, and this one guy told me, he's like, "You're the worst priest I've ever played with. Like, you don't know how to play this." He's like, "You need to read at how to play a priest." You know, and I'm like, oh my God, well, you know, I made like half of these spells I'm using or whatever. But you know, what he was really saying was just that he was upset about the dungeon fight because, you know, my healing was fine on that fight. It wasn't the problem with that. It was really the gear was the problem, and the DPS was the problem, like in the group, right? Like it was, I think this is during Kata when like the dungeons were really, really hard. And and so the players would blame the healer or blame you know, the group or whatever. And really ultimately what it was just that the average player doesn't really do very good DPS, you know, even if they have good gear, depending on the rotations and GCDs and all these things. Like the player performance can be kind of crappy, you know, and so it was just kind of overtuned. And that was the takeaway, right? But if you saw it on the forums, you might be like, oh my God, healers need buffs or something, right? And so, again, that's kind of why you really, I think, have to play the game to really understand the problem.
Absolutely. I always blame the DPS, by the way, because if you kill the thing fast enough, none of the other problems matter.
Yeah.
You don't mitigate damage or throw a heal if the thing dies instantly. So get on it, DPS.
Candace, you ever wade into it with Diablo just to hear what people on the streets are saying?
Oh, all the time. And also, it's hard for me because I would do the same thing that Chris did, especially because I would make like the dungeons and the raids. And so I would purposefully put myself in pickup groups for like the heroic, the hard version of the raid, just to see like what are their points of failure? But mostly it was more of like a weird behavioral econ thing where I wanted to see like at what point are people breaking down? Why are they calling each other out? What causes these kind of conflicts? And the hardest part was anything group finder, because I would purposefully not interject myself into the situation, which I could have. I could have stood up for somebody and been like, hey, you don't know what's going on in this person's life. Like, who cares if they're not doing DPS? Do you really like care about 3 minutes? Or, like I really, that defender, that lover in me wants to come out and like defend people. But also I kind of want to watch how players interact with each other and why and what causes this kind of conflict, just so I can kind of take note. But I think that to answer your question from earlier, I don't think there is an ultimate way to utilize player feedback. There's no like one answer. I think the answer is more like knowing which avenues to use for what purpose and making sure that those are in harmony, right? So like using the forums for like very specific, like here's how we're going to use the forums and you can engage with the forums, because also we know who our forums audience is, and understanding like who that audience is and not what weight to give their feedback, but what kind of feedback you can expect, using Twitter as a medium, using Reddit AMAs as a medium, but just like kind of understanding and respecting the power of each one of those mediums, and then getting enough like perspectives and getting enough developers in there to get them also kind of like running the gamut of all this stuff. Because I was definitely not front stage material until I'd been doing it for several years. And so there's kind of like a training that needs to happen to you as a developer, not just like counting your ums and learning to project with your voice and learning how to not like RBF on stage. There's also the conditioning that you have to really truly listen and to understand when someone's asking a question, like when you need to ask for more information or when you can just blindly answer the question. And so sorry, that was like a lot.
Yeah, that too. I would say also the way I used to do it was I would try to be really targeted with what I was looking for in terms of feedback. I spent most of my time on the class forums for Blizzard, for WoW, but mostly reading. I rarely posted, but the signal noise ratio is really bad in most places. Like usable stuff from a developer standpoint is usually a very, very small percentage. But it could be very useful if I knew there was one thing I wanted to, read feedback on. Like if there was one spell or ability, I would go to that class's forums and look for any links that were talking about one specific thing, and then read up on that. And it was usually in response to something I had experienced in game, that like Chris was saying, like when you play it, you'll see, what's actually happening, how it's being used, how it's not being used. And you can sort of develop the problem from there and then read to support what people are saying about it on the forums. But you can balance that against your personal experiences, your anecdotal experiences, and your knowledge of game design and what you intended for that, that spell or ability and how it's breaking down. So if you go in pretty targeted, that can be really helpful for a developer. But then having the discipline not to, fall into the maelstrom, not to go reading a lot of the other stuff that's just going to wear you down, because there's so much frustration, and it gets it goes all the way up to people wanting you to die, right? So
yeah.
And obviously a lot of that, if you pull back on far enough, you can realize everyone there is there because they love the game. So take it all with a grain of salt. But if you're not, even having said that, it can wear you down if you spend too much time in there. So go in, get what you need, get out, right?
Yeah,
Keep
it's
working.
like the maw. Exactly.
Yeah, that's right. No one escapes the maw, right?
You can't fall into the river of souls. That's how it works.
That's right. So that would be kind of my advice to developers, is try to be really targeted, with what you need out of the system. On the other side, it's a much, like I was saying, it's a much bigger problem. Getting the player base to be satisfied with the level of communication or the depth of the communication is really, really challenging.
And it's even more challenging when you have a game as big as World of Warcraft, where, only X percentage of your player base is going to speak English. And so whenever you want that kind of feedback from other regions or other languages, you have to partner with somebody who can also understand not just the question that the player's asking, but the soul of the question that the player's asking. I ran into this actually when I went to Taiwan, where we had a translator who would translate for us, but they didn't understand. They didn't play World of Warcraft. So it's hard for me to tell you exactly what the person said, but the direct translation basically of what the person had asked was very not what the player was asking. Because, we have abilities that are called like Phoenix Rebirth. And it's like, what rebirth do you mean? Do you mean like resurrection? Do you mean rebirth? Anyway, so it was really hard for me to understand some of the questions from these blogs that were interviewing us, because we didn't have, we had a common language we were speaking, which was, we had a translator who was taking Mandarin and putting it into English, but we didn't have the common language that we were speaking, which was like Azerothian and gamer. You know what I'm saying? So the language thing is kind of twofold.
I want to hear more about this person that didn't play World of Warcraft. I mean, I'm shocked.
Yeah, there's less people who haven't played World of Warcraft than have. So
Yeah, proverbial
they're a
O.J.
minority.
Simpson juror of the gaming world. Yeah.
Yeah, I think another subtopic of this too is kind of, you touched on, Kevin, is kind of like this idea of how do you deal with really, really negative, toxic people or comments, and what is the best practices there? Because I think, a lot of times developers get into this dark place where they get all this negative feedback. Sometimes it's bound to happen. You make some content or some feature that players don't like, and it didn't really hit the mark. And, this happens to every developer. And then when that does happen, especially in a live service game, you're going to catch a lot of heat from the players about that. And so knowing how to sort of mentally set yourself to deal with that, and a philosophy behind that, I think is really important. And that's something that I kind of developed myself through the years, because there's some times where I got blasted for certain things or whatever they were. And like you said, you do literally get death threats sometimes. And I know there was not really, nothing's really going to happen, hopefully, but it's the way I always saw it is just kind of like you said, they're super passionate people, and they just want you to hear them. And the way that they think that you'll hear them is by, kind of acting like a douche, right? And so, and it does work, honestly. It's a lot of times it's just it's so loud and so sort of shocking, it makes you really think about that. But I think, a lot of times, the response the player is expecting isn't usually what they get, which is, either the developer will turtle up, or he'll just log off from any feedback. He'll and so my sort of philosophy here was always just, separate really the emotion they're having with really kind of what they're saying. Think about it almost as if they're some sort of AI, or just kind of take it in as analytics, really, right? And don't get so personal about it. And
robots.
I guess I really don't like that, or yeah, exactly.
That's actually really funny, because that's the direct opposite approach that I take.
You're trying to
What I try to do when I'm listening to somebody is tap into the emotion, because I feel like there's many ways that people can feel heard. The way that they want to feel heard, often when a player is giving you feedback on your encounter or on your class or on your game, is, well, I only feel heard if you implemented my change, right? Like you nerf the hit points by 50% or you buff the damage by 25%. And that's the only way that I as a player can feel heard. But there's actually like a lot of ways to make people feel heard. And so I tend to lean into the emotion, when someone says this boss was too hard, you need to nerf it by 25%. We wiped it 75%. So that's like the perfect like tuning point. I say like, well, what makes it feel like it had too much health? And
I just think it good, but
yeah. or what emotions did you feel whenever you wiped? Well, we were pressed for time. Oh, so does that mean that there was like a conflicting ability? Anyway, so you can get so much more out of the person if you ask them kind of how they're feeling and where that feeling comes from. And then the beauty of it is you don't even have to implement the change. You can just like make them feel heard and be like, well, that's actually a good point for the future. Or,
Another really important thing. Oh, sorry, finish yours.
Oh, but it also gives you a chance to reflect on what they said and kind of. No, that's it. Go ahead.
All right. The other really important thing that most people don't realize is that the objectives of the developer and the objectives of the player, each individual player, are very different, right? The objective of feedback from a player perspective is not to make the game better. It's to make their character more powerful, typically, right? Or some other metric by which they're going to have more fun. And so they care less about the integrity of the overall experience, and they care a lot less about the enjoyment level of a lot of people around them, outside of their particular group or play group or guild or whatever it is. So a lot of times players will only be satisfied if they get the buffs they want, and they're really upset about the nerfs. Whereas the developer has to care about the needs of all the players and the game, the integrity of the game. So it's often going to end in disaster just because the objectives are cross purpose, right? You're not necessarily on the same team as the people you're trying to make happy, because you guys want different things. So, like again, when we talk about things that are designed to inflict pain but serve a greater purpose, right? Death is always the absurd example, but I can't believe you guys let me die in a game. That's terrible. But death does so much work in making you enjoy the experience and feel the challenge and try to get better. And it just does so much work in making the game a lot better experience. But it's no fun. It's no fun to die in a game. But people don't necessarily ask, get rid of death. Death is terrible, right? Because that game wouldn't be any fun. But they do, in smaller doses, ask for little things that are going to help prevent death, right? Their goal is to be better, more powerful, and to win more. But the developer's looking at it from I'm trying to offer an experience.
Yeah, it's funny because at some point the developers use the term quality of life improvements. You see this all over the industry now in patch notes. It's like quality of life improvements.
I hate that phrase so much nowadays. How common?
But it's funny because players will twist that to like, I need to buff my damage. It's quality of life improvement.
Right. Right.
And so yeah,
quality of life meaning not dying. That's quality of life.
Yes, or like traveling from one point A to point B. Like it's we need increased travel because it's a quality of life. Like traveling is too slow, and so it's a quality of life improvement. And it's not. It's like you said, it's part of the core game. And if you just remove all the rules, well, you're not going to have a game anymore.
Yeah. So yeah, you guys aren't on the same team. You're not fighting for the same end outcome. And yet you're trying to come to some middle ground where you're both happy. It's a really, really tough problem.
I wonder if it's harder now. I was going to ask if you all think that there's a big difference in the way like indie developers, smaller developers that aren't shackled by layers and layers of marketing and shareholder expectations communicate with their player base and large companies do. But I'm sure that there are, but it occurs to me now that so much gaming press and really anything relating to Twitter generally is just set up to kind of trap people with gotchas. And it's like a very dangerous environment to misspeak in. And so I would feel like maybe even smaller developers that would want to just shoot from the hip are probably wary of accidentally ticking off one person, then just having that explode now and just turns into a huge to-do. Things just spread so freaking quickly that.
Yeah. It is interesting. I will say, like, call back to last week in Valheim. Valheim came out of nowhere, right? I mean, there wasn't this like 18-month hype machine that's been in place for Valheim, and everyone's looking up every little bit and scrap from the developers to see what they're working on and what the latest discussion is, and everyone's theory crafting about the fastest way to get, through all 5 bosses and all that, right? And I think that really added to the experience, right? I think that it made it a true, exploration because nobody knew anything about it and they just jumped in and started having a great time. As opposed to like a World of Warcraft patch where it's like it's been on the PTR, it's been milked and data mined and played through, and everyone's already simmed everything, and that sense of exploration is largely gone. And I think that's another thing people should be looking at is, and this is a really tough one because it goes against, like, every marketing person is rolling their eyes right now because it's like, no, you have to have a huge hype machine and get everyone ready. That's going to increase sales and get everyone talking about it and buzzing about it. And but it can do a lot of damage to the actual experience once delivered. And I think Valheim did another, in all the things Valheim has done, it delivered another great example of why that sense of discovery is so important. And so just to finish that thought, the communication between devs and players can, hurt the overall experience because nobody was chatting with the devs of Valheim before it came out, and people had a blast playing it versus everyone's talking to the devs in some sense in the next WoW expansion or next WoW patch. And, a lot of the mystery's gone by the time it's out.
I mean, the honeymoon phase for World of Warcraft content is incredibly short now because everybody on both sides knows how, this thing goes. They know when stuff drops about how long it's going to take to hit X gear level in week 1, when it's just raw mythics. And then when this opens, you're going to have to be here. And the dance is just so choreographed. I feel like a brand new game in a genre like Valheim, and with a studio not really anybody had been paying attention to before, you're going to get a much longer period before. And the value proposition is different too. I mean, if I get 100 hours out of a $20 game with my friends, it seems unlikely to me that I'm still going to be banging down the doors of somebody in Scandinavia about how they absolutely need to fix Flint ASAP, right. Or, it's like,
where are the other 3 bosses? Yeah.
Kind of. Yeah. You can just sort of move on. When you've got a recurring paying subscription, I think there's a justifiably bigger sense of entitlement. I'm not saying that entitlement is always in scale, but I get it. It's you're keeping the servers online. So,
and that's one of the downsides of Kickstarter is that the Kickstarter, people feel like they're on the board. They feel like shareholders because they've paid for the game early. So they want to be part of the development process. And so that's another really tricky part of Kickstarter is how the developers deliver on their vision rather than the vision of everyone who pitched in and, has their own version of what the game should become.
This is where I'm just going to say, anybody in the audience that wants to come up, ask a question about any experiences up here or just relate an anecdote about player dev communication, just raise your hand anytime and we'll page you up.
Yeah, one other thing I think could be interesting is, BlizzCon has always been hailed as a sort of unique opportunity for the developers to interact with fans and, have that sort of dynamic. And there's not a lot of things like that. There's not a lot of other video game studio conventions. And I've also been on stage at BlizzCon, and I know Candace and Kevin, you have. What is your kind of feeling, or what is your kind of thought of that experience, and and also maybe what was an interesting question that a player asked you, if you ever had that experience?
Yeah, I'd say BlizzCon in general, I think is a great source of study for this very thing we're talking about, because I remember doing the PR training for, BlizzCon that we had to do before we got up on stage. And it was really interesting because one of the comments the guy made was, now, roughly, you want to keep these lessons in mind, but you'll be okay because you're in front of a friendly audience, right? Like, people that are there are there because they love your games and they love your, right? The PR guys probably aren't saying that anymore now.
It's just simpler times, yeah.
Because it's gotten a little nastier at times, right? Like, and so studying why, the transition, of, it being largely a friendly audience to a tentative one, and in some cases a nasty audience, right? I think would be an important thing to study, figuring out, why that's happening. And is it just the age of the whole endeavor? Like, everyone's gotten a little more jaded. Are there techniques that are being used that are different from then versus now? What is the source for that, diminishment? And because it was just so positive back in the day, and people were just so happy to be there that it made it much easier for presenters to get up on stage, despite the nerves and things that we might feel, because, they wanted to hear what you had to say. They weren't waiting for you to say something they didn't like so they could jump down your throat. So it was, different times, as you said, simpler times. It'd be worth a lot of analysis, I think.
That's a really good point you make. I don't know if I've experienced toxicity at BlizzCon, and maybe that's just because people paid like $500 to get there. Like, a lot of people don't live in Anaheim. They had to buy their BlizzCon ticket. They had to drive, and so the people that you're going to interact with at BlizzCon are already, they're already really hyped about what you're doing, even if they're also going to be disappointed by some design decision that was made. Like, they're there because they want to be there, and so I'm not specific. I'm of course, there's some people at the signing table who'll take pot shots because it's funny and they think that they can, like, nerf rogues or like something kind of cute like that. I've had some people be like just legit mean at BlizzCon. It's usually at the signing tables, actually. It's never after a speaking engagement. What I enjoyed about BlizzCon is, you are surrounded by people who are just as hyped about your stuff as you are, which is very invigorating. I also enjoy that when I spoke about Diablo, when I got to get on the main stage and talk about the panel for Diablo, I wasn't told what to say. I wasn't told what my topic was there, I wasn't told what my talking points were. They were like, hey, you represent monsters in Diablo. Tell the audience what you think would be interesting. And they completely enabled me to do that. They got me all the videos I needed, and I felt like the architect of that. And so it gave me a lot of ownership over that, which I really, really, really enjoyed. But the other cool part about BlizzCon, especially after we did our like build a boss workshop, we did a thing where we built a boss kind of live on stage, and it was actually live. Like, we didn't practice it or anything. We practiced building other bosses whenever we practiced our bit. But then we sat in the Dark Moon Fair, I guess, which is where you go to meet the devs. And we said, like, hey, if you want to talk about the boss or anything like that, come chat at the Dark Moon Fair. And people were super, super cool. They like waited in lines to talk to us. They were super respectful. But I can see, but also at the same time, I did the live raid thing. That was my first big time being on stage at BlizzCon. I was like one of the camera people on stage for a live raid, which meant that I had to follow the people that were raiding. But they chose to have me on stage for reasons that I'll never understand. And and I was super pensive about it because I was afraid, like, oh, they're just going to rip apart my appearance, or I was like terribly afraid of what one 13-year-old in Minnesota would think about my nose,
Right.
And the people on the forums were just, I mean, it happened. I opened the forums and it was all ugly, like bitch and mean things. And what the fuck is she doing on the stage? And probably like serving
was
drinks.
Elon Musk, by the way.
Yeah. So the in-person, aspect of being at BlizzCon, I think gets rid of a lot of that negativity.
I think, like you said, though, it was very invigorating back in the day, because you go from the WoW forums all week and all month and all year, and just the train wreck going on in there, to BlizzCon audience, which was just like, they were so happy you were there. They were just super positive and they wanted to share all their amazing stories. And you'd come back to the office refreshed and ready to tackle the next, big problem and move the game forward. So there can be amazing relationships between players and devs, but they tend not to be. It's a really interesting topic to try to figure out how do we get the best out of that relationship rather than what is traditionally just the worst,
Anecdotally, the 1 year that I was working at BlizzCon, I've been a couple times, but I was working there in 2018, just working a bunch of different booths around the Heroes of the Storm area. And man, that year was wild because that was the year that Diablo Immortal got announced, and there was that massive head fake around, are they going to announce D4 or not? And, Blizzard had put out a couple of statements in the weeks beforehand trying to basically walk things back and calm people down because they knew everybody thought, D4 announcement's coming up. And they were like, no, it's not the thing you want, but it is going to be a thing. It was like a kind of tipping your hat to it. And then, I just remember interacting with people there, other Blizzard devs that had seen, how Reddit was blowing up in the wake of that Diablo Immortal panel and everything. And they were just so freaking crestfallen. And it broke my heart because I know this sounds just like so fucking maudlin, but, some of like the most talented people I personally worked with on Heroes had switched over to the incubation department. We're working on Diablo Immortal. And I knew that they were just busting ass on this game and doing a really incredible job. Like, they may not have agreed with everything about the design direction. They may not have even agreed with the announcement. I think a lot of folks at Blizzard probably would have been like, you are setting yourselves up to just get roasted by announcing it in this way. In hindsight, everybody somehow knew. But it just broke my heart to see these people that had been pouring themselves into this game, like quite earnestly, doing the best they can in the thing they were on because they love Diablo, just getting crushed online. And then, but the mood of people at the show, as you mentioned, and it's a bit of an echo chamber because it's people who have paid to be there, right? And so they're invested in having a good time. But I felt like you could really civilly discuss even what had just happened with the announcement. And there was like, you could have nuanced conversations about it. Like when I would chat with people in Lime, first off, I felt totally safe and secure at the Heroes booth because I felt like people had such low expectations for what our game was going to announce because it was like, just not the biggest game at Blizzard. And we just came out and like crushed it with some fan favorites with this meme Janitor Leoric skin. It had been a brand new hero Orphea in this sort of like Heroes of the Storm canon, which signaled long-term investment from the studio, maybe in the IP. Rip that. But, so the fan base was really placated. And so I was talking to people at the booth and they were, online people were like, oh my God, Orphea, it's this weeb shit. Why are they putting these waifus in Heroes of the Storm? And this is an awful direction. And, but in person, people were like, I don't know, I'll probably go check her out. Like, it's not what I would have expected. But the truth is, I knew the content was good. I knew that they were going to have a fun time. And people experiencing it, and seeing a developer in person, I think just kind of calms them down and lets them walk the middle a little bit more, right? And I could even, chat with them about Diablo Immortal, and they're like, well, I'll probably go play it. It's like not what I would have wanted, but I'll go check it out since I'm here. Whereas you would not find a moderate opinion like that on Reddit or Twitter about Diablo Immortal that day. It was just basically, if you wanted traction, you had to be torching this thing. And so every week I will circle back to just blaming the media that we use for distorting conversations, and that's my time to do it this week. As it turns out, people are way nicer in person.
Yes.
Thought.
Almost all conversations in person are somewhat more dignified and constructive than over the internet.
Yeah, context is important. One of you mentioned humanizing developers earlier in this, and I think that that's just like a really critical thing to do. But also, if you play it up too much, there's a certain toxic segment of the player base that like takes that attempt at humanization as this sort of like, I don't know, it's not virtue signaling, but it's a marketing play to kind of, it's a fellow kids kind of, let's make so-and-so more relatable, and they can see through that shit too. So
The other thing I think is sometimes frequently we assume the identity of the person on the other side of the comments on the internet, right? We start building up what they are in our mind, and a lot of times we're just wrong. But like the classic example is, oh, this person is swearing, and using all kinds of obscenities, and well, that's a grown man that is, somewhat respectable in society or something, like, and that it could just be a 10-year-old, it could be a 10-year-old ranting and raving. And how you would react to that in real life is very different. Like if some guy in a suit and tie walks up and he starts ranting and raving, it's just like, that's very different than a kid running around using obscenities, right? The kid just makes you laugh, right? The kid's just, oh, that's hilarious. Yeah. The kid get that mouth, like,
yeah.
And so we have a real hard time, because we tend to think all these people that are responding are, some of us think they're all kids, but some of us think many of them are reasonable people in real life. And that can like very much damage, like, well, if all these reasonable people think I'm doing a terrible job, what kind of job am I doing? Right.
Yeah. And that's the other thing about Blizzcon too is you now you can put faces to this,
right.
like, the faceless player base that you don't really interact with. I wanted to, because we brought up, I think your name's Yermalai. If you have a question, go ahead.
Thanks, Chris. Not to you, because we have spoken before over chat. Thank you for inviting me up. That is my name. You've done it perfectly. Long time WoW fan and not a recent player, but it's certainly not a comment on the heart and soul that you guys just been mentioning that previous and existing developers are still putting into the franchise. And I'm glad that I get to speak now before we move too much off the absolutely perfect segue that I was putting into 10 seconds in my head, so I don't take up too much time that you guys just spent on at least 15 minutes on as I was waiting my turn. My question was, in the lieu of needing to get that feedback rather than just shutting off and not having to interact with the community that can be what is now called toxic, but you guys used the term mean or abrasive perhaps. I was wondering how much doubt that brings into the life of an artist, whether your artistic medium is code or it's more visual or it's sound. I think we have a pretty diverse panel over here to speak about that. And the reason I'm asking about doubt is not just because it's something that I've experienced personally in my life, trying to find my path in professional world, but just because as long as like I've had experiences building something myself, and that's the biggest challenge, just trying to stay the course to build something awesome.
Yeah, I think the potential for doubt is tremendous. I think any voice you hear repetitively is going to wear you down. Just because of the fact that it's repetitive, it can be like, well, maybe they're right. Like, but I talk about ego a lot, and that you have to have the right amount of ego to be, a good developer. You have to have enough ego to believe in your vision and to shrug off all the sort of feeble attempts to get you to change your vision to please somebody who's not invested in what your big idea is. But not so much ego that you never listen, that you're always right and no one can ever change your mind about anything when things are legitimately going wrong. And so really, it's a really tough middle ground to find. But I think it's actually really important. And just to speak to that other thing, the last thing you mentioned, I think a lot of artists worry about that transition from, keeping it in like their craft, their art internal to exposing it to the masses, right? That's a terrifying moment for most artists. And yeah, I would definitely recommend just getting it out there, ripping off the Band-Aid. That is the best way for you to grow and mature as both an artist and your ability to, receive and parse, feedback that's going to come in, and understand the difference between people that are just trashing to trash and people that are legitimately interested in your work, but want to see it, get better. But it's an important part of the process, and at some point you have to take the lead.
When I think about doubt, I think about there's the meta of you are making rules in a video game for people to play and enjoy the video game rules, right? Like if you're designing a chess piece, here's the rules of how they move, and maybe someone doesn't like that rule and they'll give you that feedback. But there's also kind of this meta above that. There's rules that we abide by when we make our video games, and we call those like pillars of the game. And I think if you're ever in doubt and you get a piece of feedback that might resonate with you, or you might not be sure what to do with that feedback, you can always kind of refer back to that set of rules that you have for your game to help you guide yourself in that decision. And hopefully there's enough people that you've surrounded yourself with that also understand those rules and those pillars, that you at least don't feel completely out in the wind whenever you get a piece of feedback that you don't know what to do with, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, big fan of pillars.
I also think too, it's like I was having a conversation with another developer, and he's a lead, and he was telling me that he has team members who struggle with feedback because they're getting feedback from their lead, they're getting feedback from other leads, they're getting feedback from players, and they just don't know who to listen to, right? And they don't know like which feedback they should incorporate, because a lot of times it's always like contradictory, right? Like someone's saying it should be red, some say it should be blue, whatever. And really the advice is just kind of, you should treat feedback as kind of, you don't have to implement any sort of feedback anyone gives you. It's up to you to parse and decide on what you want to change. And really the guiding thing, like Candace is saying, is usually principles or pillars of what your design is, like what experience you're trying to give to the player. If someone says, hey, I don't like that you die in this thing, well, what is your goals of what you're trying to make? Is it supposed to be, how challenging is it supposed to be? You should stick to what your vision and what your experience you're trying to make.
Yeah, why change that is sometimes doing nothing is the right call. Because change always brings with it some bad, because people hate change. So if you're not sure, sit on it, stew on it.
Wyatt Cheng from Diablo and WoW used to say, if you're acting on more than 25% of feedback you're getting, you're overreacting. And I think his point there, right? Yeah, it's great. Well, Wyatt also gave this really wonderful quote that said, any mechanic, when sufficiently overpowered, will be perceived as fun, right? And so you combine those, right? He's great. I loved Wyatt.
How you doing now, by the way? So nice to hear you.
Hey, yeah, it's the ex-Blizzard Club here. It's good to see some friendly faces. I'm doing all right. I guess I don't want to steal the room, but post Blizzard did Riot League of Legends for a bit. Then I started my own company, which didn't manage to ship what I wanted to make in time before my partner died. And then I went over to Europe for about a year and a half to kind of like take a break between that, and then worked on Ori 2, which released last year. And now I'm starting on an action RPG. So
very nice.
Yeah.
I'll
back to
throw
the needs of.
Sorry.
Oh, please go ahead.
I was just gonna. I thought you were done. Sorry, Zelnith, and good job on Ori. I'll just throw in my 30 seconds on design stuff. It's I always would tell my students, it's so good to listen to somebody and listen to where their problems are at, but very rarely listen to their solutions, because they won't see the big picture. They can't see the forest. You have more of a top-down view, and you need to listen to what their truth is and what their problems are, but not necessarily their solutions. And that seems to free up a lot of people, to take that feedback in.
Yeah, that's a great point. One of the things I got the most out of the forums back in the day was quantity. If there most of the posts are less than 3 pages, and then there's one that's 112 pages, that's telling you this is a thing a lot of people care about. And yeah, if you go looking in there for solutions, you're going to see a lot of, again, more noise than signal. But it does tell you about the importance of the topic and what's on people's mind, and that can definitely steer you in the right direction of looking at the problem again and with fresh eyes and seeing what you might want to tackle.
Yeah. Another thing that's great about forums that Riot did and encouraged pretty heavily was that after you had a solution to what you thought was a problem, right, that has been brought up on the forums previously, to kind of work it out with the design team, before going too far with it, try opening that idea up in a thread that of complaints and be like, hey, what would a solution like this? What problems would you guys see in something like this? To just get that mass rapid fire set of feedback. Now, if it's part of an interconnected, complex set of changes, they might not get it. But if it's something directed, they often can point out issues or things you just wouldn't see because of your own personal blind spots as well. And I really liked that practice from there.
I just want to add, I've not ever been exposed to like a ton of, I would say, public-facing feedback. If I end up getting notes, it's either this sound is killer, which I'm not going to do anything about, or it's this sound is annoying, which in pretty much every case means that there's some buggy behavior going on. Like it's very rarely that I would get, I think, a message from above that I needed to tweak something because taste-wise, the player base was out of alignment with what I thought should maybe go there. But I just want to add generally that I think coping with feedback like this and not letting it pull you out of your rhythm and make you feel like you're just not a good content creator it comes with experience, but that experience curve can be accelerated by working at places or underneath management that really have structured feedback built into the culture. And actually, my time at Blizzard was really good for this. The several companies I would say I worked at before their contracting, I was mostly left alone. And so I was mostly my own judge in terms of, is this good or not? Does this fit or not? And people, there's a lot of trust. But that means that I didn't build up a nice thick skin. Whereas at Blizzard, I had a boss that was very much in my business all the time. And it was for the best. He really pushed me to kind of polish things over and over again. And over the course of a year of working with him, was I finally able to sort of like get feedback with him, without crumbling, because I had been kind of nursed up to that point where I could start to see, I could even get feedback from him and more or less tell him straight up, no, I'm not going to do that. Like I can now separate this as a critical issue from a thing that my boss just happens to particularly want. And it's not even a really defensible thing. It's just kind of a quirk. And like, you can then start to, control yourself and stand on your own feet. But I think there are probably a lot of developers where if you're trying to avoid getting feedback and you're that sort of a person, you can do it. It's to your own detriment in the long run, but giving feedback is tough. Honesty is tough. Having taste and like committing to standards is tough, and not everywhere is going to do it. So the sooner you kind of go through the ringer there, it's probably the better, I would say, for you career-wise. Yeah.
It's also really tough early on because most of us have that sort of imposter complex, of
right.
I'm not good enough to do this job. And then you hear a bunch of feedback confirming that from the forums or trying to confirm that. And it's just like, oh God, what am I doing? So yeah, that process is very rough, but very important.
I wanted to pop in just really quick too and give my take on what thick skin means, because I feel like some people think that developing thick skin means that you have to have a tolerance for abuse, and that's just not the case. When I tell people about having thick skin, what I talk about is trying to not take things so personally. So if someone doesn't like something you made, it doesn't mean they don't like you, right? They're not attacking you as a human. Totally. They're attacking an idea. And even though they might be actually attacking you as a human, if you can understand where they're coming from and what they're trying to express to you, that's sort of what I mean by thick skin. But in no way am I trying to perpetuate that one must just tolerate abuse and just say that that's
That's a
part
good
of game
point.
development.
Great point.
And yes, that's amazing, Candace. And there are so many abusive people in game development, especially at the creative direction level. And these, for better or for worse, high effective salesmen who manage to pull some money out of investors. Right? I've dealt with some really noxious, toxic creative directors in my time as a game design consultant. And a lot of what I do is I go companies and try to help make their gameplay better. And then they get some of them will get super threatened by having someone else around who kind of just knows what they're doing with really basic shit. I don't give a fuck about their creative idea or whatever. I'm just here to make it better. But they will instead make it about them or go into personal attacks and that shit. Look, that's the fastest thing you should do for firing either a client or a boss. And the few times I haven't done that, I've always regretted it. Yeah. And so much of it, I think, comes back to Kevin's comment on ego, right? Which is it about bringing something great for the players, or bringing something great to themselves? Is it protecting themselves from a pain they don't want to examine? Then you're in dangerous territory. If they're just misguided, then you can realign on goals and aims. And I could rant on this forever. It's incredibly vital to me.
I'd love to know specific cases so I don't mess up on this stuff. You feel really strong about that, Zelnith. Any specific like instance you can bring up? You don't have to name names, but I'm just curious.
Name names. I mean, it's up to you.
There's 6 people in the room, right? It doesn't look like we have any reporters, but
by the way, I am streaming on Twitch. So.
To 100 million people, yeah.
Fantastic. All right. Well,
it's not a fully ethereal conversation, so yeah, temper yourself if you want.
Okay. Well, I should have known that before I said anything, but I'll tell a story of 2 well-meaning people who did some really shitty things towards each other. So I was on an R&D project for a new concept that, when I was brought in to take a look at it, right, I was supposed to just be there briefly, and it was a really solid idea. I don't want to go into the details of it, but there was this really great, meta system for the project itself, and then they just needed to really execute on like the finesse of the tactile elements of the game, put together the actual gameplay, and I am an absolute nerd for co-op. Actually, this probably won't shock Candace, because I've had this rant with her before, but I abhor MMOs with a passion. I always have, and I always will. And it's not because of the nature of bringing lots of people into a space, but just the quality execution to get that many people in a space has always been making massive compromises, right? And so I ended up working on WoW for 7 years, but never really loved that space, right? I just loved the problems that I got to solve. Anyways, so I was working on this project, and the idea was kind of a micro MO, right? Where just a few people, but because I love collaboration in co-op games. I really do. Like, I love the idea that there are these different set of problems, and each person brings a different set of tools to the team, and you have a set of challenges, right? So this was one of those type of concepts, and I came onto this team, and my job was very hands-offish. It was like, hey, examine the overall structure, examine the gameplay, see if the team is moving in the right direction, and then make a lot of recommendation on tools and tooling, because that was what they wanted help with. And there was these 2 members on the team. I'll call them Kate and Todd, just to keep the genders same so I don't mess it up. And so Kate and Todd were like opposite ends of the design spectrum. Kate was a phenomenal abstract thinker with great ability to see the whole picture and the way that all of these different moving gears would come together. And Todd was an extremely experienced, finessed, tactile feedback person who just understood how to make every motion of a character feel great and how all of the flow and control for a direct console game needed to work. And I was like, wow, this is a fantastic spectrum here. I'm super excited to see how this dynamic works. And unfortunately, due to their relative egos, it didn't. I ended up getting pulled in between as this sort of moderator who neither of them wanted moderating, right? Kate and her abstract skills had a really good general structure, but couldn't execute at the low level. And Todd could execute the low level, but didn't understand why all of this systemic stuff mattered, right? And so what ended up happening was that I was either brought in as a bartering chip and when in their conflicts, or in one case, I made a bunch of recommendations on tools, and they weren't quite the tools that Todd wanted. Right? He didn't like that, and so Kate tried to use that as a reason to have Todd fired from the team due to saying insubordination. And it was just that he had a different set of directions, and I was like, "Hey, that's not cool. That's not leadership. This is just politicking because you don't like this person. That's not cool." So they sent Kate off to a leadership retreat to basically just, hey, go, because at that point they were charged with the team. It was about 20 people team. And I was like, cool, okay, great, get some basic leadership training. And no one comes into this fresh and easy. Leadership is hard, right? Especially when you're trying to balance implementation and tactical direction. It's a hard problem. Anyways, while I was gone, they had a problem with their camera system. And I'm sorry I have to be so generic on the details here, but the TLDR was Kate had written this camera system and it was broken and no one knew how it was written because she had written it herself. Cool, no problem. So I was like, hey, I'm a little technical. All the programmers are busy on bigger stuff. Let me jump in real quick. I went in. I was like, all right, I don't know how any of this works. I'm going to comment it all out, and I'm going to hard code an XYZ location for the camera where it's facing so we can have play tests. We just have to play test everything in this one room of the prototype. When Kate comes back in a week or two, no problem. So I made the changes, documented exactly how to do it, how to undo it, said if you don't want to do that, that's fine. Just message me and I'll undo it so you're back to business. I got an email back from this lady, and it said, "How dare you go in and touch code that I wrote? I would never do that to you or to someone else in this team. This is such an insult to my intelligence." And I was just like, what, where is this coming from? I'm like, and at this point, it just baffled my mind because it was literally like, hey, this is a Band-Aid swing prototype, not a permanent change or judge on what you have. So I ended up bringing that to the founder of the company. I was just like, hey, listen, you need to have a conversation about this because this is, I'm generally on her side for a lot of these discussions. She has wonderful insights here, but this is really weird. And they were like, all right, yep, when she's back in 3 days, we'll talk and take care of this. Well, 3 hours later, they came back and actually decided to fire that person from the team. And I was like, oh shit, I did not mean for that to happen. So I was like, okay, well, that's unfortunate, but maybe we'll see how it flows with, that out of the way for the moment. Well, Todd then used this to make a play for why he should be the design director of the team. And believing that I had been siding with the other person against them, then decided to use this as justification for why I should be removed from the team. And so if you've come into anything as a consultant, when people start using you as a bartering chip or as leverage to move themselves up, get out, right? But this is just an example of two really talented, capable people basically using whatever was present to try to get themselves into power, as opposed to focusing on what was necessary. What do the players want? They want a really interesting, deep experience where the gameplay feels good and controls well and looks good, right? Instead of aligning on what their powers were, they were so focused on fighting the thing they didn't understand in their midst. And it wasn't just me, it was each other.
So my chat has a question. Who got custody of the kids?
In the end, both were removed from the team.
All right.
I was also removed from the team, and the project failed about 2 years later, and then it rebooted into a completely different thing with a different team. So no one won in that situation. The company didn't win. The individuals didn't win. And that's a really unfortunate situation.
That's wild.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, politics and game sucks. I've tried to avoid it, and I like my own companies better. Everybody just gets along and we just have fun.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Dude, I'm gonna take one moment, just call it a really positive team in the industry right now. It's a company called Snack Pass, run by a guy out of Yale named Kevin and his partner Jamie. And they actually, and they let me put together a team to basically build some game stuff for them. And the only thing I indexed on was people who worked together well, were emotionally intelligent, and cared about producing what was necessary. The end result has been a team that is producing great results for them, is super kind to each other, is staying in budget and focused on what needs to be done. And it's probably one of the best organizations I've ever worked with in my life. And that's rare. right? That you just have people who care about each other, work together well, and don't make it about themselves.
Yeah, wow. I feel like I think you have a bright future in just like writing a podcast about adventures in contracting game development, because that is just gripping.
Unfortunately, I also have a background in NDAs, so tricky to get the rights to do that.
Yeah.
The further stories of Todd and Kate, we all want to know.
That's true.
If
Todd
I will
shows up and buys the repo ice cream now every other weekend, and
have you guys watched Mythic Quest yet?
No, not yet.
I got
Not
through.
yet. I
an
want
episode.
Okay, it is toxic design director culture in a tiny 20-minute bubble, and it is well worth watching. It's highly entertaining.
I liked it. I know. I think I got through the second episode, and I won't spoil much, but when the marketing guy kind of threw a hissy fit and made all the items free, I was like, oh, this is not real. And I couldn't take it anymore.
Man, you reminded me of an experience that I had. Something really similar. On Heroes of the Storm at one point, there was like a week after I delivered my sounds and before they were going to sort of finally launch the content pack. And in that week was sort of my boss's time to go and do all of the fine implementation details and get things tuned kind of just the way he liked it and matching the rest of the standards. And I straight up like sort of knocked and walked into his room at one point and found him fully redoing a smaller sound that I had done. Like just changing my work and shipping it. And it really bothered me for a day or two until I had some space and then just came to recognize, look, this is just what he needs to do to sort of feel good about the game overall. We're all on the same team. Blizzard's paying all of our, they're signing all of our pay stubs here. And like, you just got to let shit like that go, honestly. I could have made it like a weird hill to die on. But ultimately, I think that, things got to a better place because he also cared and decided to put that layer of frosting on top. And like, I'm going to make plenty more sounds after that. And like 99.9% of them, he never did anything to. So it was weird to run into, but it just, you're talking about somebody responding that way to having their code changed. I think that is kind of, if you're a peer, I can see it feeling more like an invasion of, you're skipping a feedback step in a way. I could see someone interpreting it that way. But I think there are some times in game dev where like, you just got to take the L, and because it's for the good of something, greater overall. This shit happens, but
I actually like to break
Work it
people
out.
of that notion that you can kind of put your maker's mark on a game that has, a staff of 500 people employed, and then, 2,000 people from satellite teams and publishing teams and whatnot. But I do understand, I do understand how violating it is when something that you made is now changed. And especially if it's not someone who has a position of authority over you. But you also have to remember that every game, you didn't come up with the rules of this game. This game has been collaborated on in World of Warcraft's case for like 15 years without you, and that, but what's important though, and what I like to focus on whenever people do this under me is when you bypass the feedback, like you said, you're robbing someone of the ability to learn, and that's not cool. It's not so much that you came in and you put your maker's mark on someone else's work, or you peed on the hydrant that they peed on, or whatever analogy that you want to use this. But mostly it's when you bypass that step, you bypass the chance to collaborate and to be an effective communicator and collaborator. And that way the whole team loses.
Oh, man, I want to segue off of that because we actually have an example here where Kevin, Chris, and I have all worked on the same little sub-project within WoW over the course of our dev lifetimes. And, one of the things that I remember was I remember giving Kevin, Warlock feedback way back in the day. And then Kevin had to hand that off to Chris, and Chris eventually to me one day. And I remember that one of the things was that, Chris, I remember when you handed it off, right, you gave me a bunch of thoughts, but you really did trust me to kind of like go crazy with it and also just own that, hey, I was going to have to figure out whatever I broke, right? And that was really important just to understand and grow and not feel like it was being, puppeteered elsewhere, And was it the same when Kevin handed it off to you?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I never felt like I always wanted to maintain sort of the soul of the original, but then I think whenever you hand off like something like a WoW class to another designer, it's just you need to let them put their own sort of kind of
Spin on it,
interpretation, right? It's just that's the only way you could ever do like true design. I feel like you can't just design something interpreting it as someone else's sort of kind of style or something, right? But I always was trying to like honor the player, have reverence for the player's like kind of image of what the class is supposed to be at its like fundamental level, right? And so like what classes, like for example a monk class was one I designed originally, and within a year or two it was given out to a different designer, and I if that designer came up to me and asked me my opinion of something to put into on the class, I would go, I'd give him my honest feedback, but I would never kind of like, hey dude, this is like my thing I made or whatever. I take that thing out of there or whatever, right? And so yeah.
Now when you were done,
I really liked.
Do you remember the email I sent you? I think it started with "How dare you."
I don't think I ever actually got that email from you.
Oh, you didn't get that one? Okay.
Greg must have deleted it from my inbox. But yeah, that was one of the things. Did you actually send that email? Because I don't remember reading it, believe it or not.
No, okay. Can't imagine.
But I think that was one of the things that I really did like at Blizzard was that when you were given a project, you were trusted with it, right? Now, if it didn't work out, then people come in to fix things up. But it was you were trusted with it, and that was really valuable. And I actually look at like a bunch. I had a big thing where people like after I left got super dramatic about it, right? Which was a little bit of an unnecessary upset. But I remember looking at some of the changes to demonology after I left. I'm like, oh, that's a completely different vision than I had for what that concept was. And then I actually had to sit down with Ian. Ian has Costas over burgers. We meet once a year, basically. Have a thing where we go and meet him for burgers at the counter. And I just sat down. I'm like, hey, Ian, I don't know who did it, but I just want to say the direction you took for that I thought was better than mine. And I think he was taken a little back when I said that, but it was true, right? Because it just captured the fantasy for something that I couldn't execute on. I couldn't grasp myself in a way that was really well done. And I think that sort of legacy is necessary when you have what will be a 20-year-old game in a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the Warcraft is nothing if not an exercise in people changing other people's shit. All the time. It's no getting around it.
I mean, and I mean, I don't want to claim there are things I don't dislike changed. There are a couple of specific ones that annoy the shit out of me, but at a certain point, I'm no longer invested in it. Right? It's no longer my project.
It's Warcraft. How dare you? So good.
Sorry. Anyways, I could ramble, but let's go back to others.
Yeah, that's actually a great segue. We're actually 30 minutes over. This has been very illuminating, and thank you so much for joining us up here and giving us this amazing take.
Candace, did you start this room?
This is actually Chris's love child. I sparked this room today because I was the first one in. That's pretty much it.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, this is with Candace, me, and Kevin and Luca. So yeah, we're trying to do this every Wednesday or so. So yeah, feel free to join in whenever. Wednesday at 6, we try to do it. So,
sure.
But yeah, I think we're gonna close out here because it is a half an hour over. Thanks for joining up, Alex, and thanks for inviting me to Clubhouse. Actually, I wouldn't be here without you, right? So,
you're welcome.
All right, cool. Well, thanks for joining us. Thanks.
I actually enjoyed listening to you guys more than most rooms. So. Have a good one.
Great.
Oh, thank you.
What an accolade. Can we put that on the website?
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. yeah.
As good as you're going to get from me.
Message from the future.
Great. Awesome.
Hey.
And shout out to all of Kevin's viewers on his stream. And, you could always come on Clubhouse and ask questions live on Kevin's stream. You don't even have to donate to him, but you should.
Man.
Very true.
But you should, though. All right, cool. Well, later, gamers. We can close it out, Candace.
See you guys.
See y'all later.